Welcome back to Season Liberally. Today we're going to be making hash browns, one of my favorite Sunday morning accompaniments to breakfast. I hope you stick around. So today we are going to be making hash browns. And I know hash browns seems like a pretty easy thing to make, right? And very, very common menu item here in the States. And you go to any diner and they're gonna have hash browns, and really it's not a lot of ingredients. Potatoes, salt, a little butter, some pepper, heat, that's it. But it can actually be a little hard, actually deceivingly so. So I'm gonna talk you through how to make the very best hash browns. So of course, first we're gonna peel our potatoes. I normally try to do that into a big bowl here, try to make it easy on myself. Today I'm gonna be using 4 russet potatoes. Next, we're gonna grate the potatoes. Now, you can use, of course, a food processor to grate these. Just cut them in a little smaller piece and they should fit in any food processor with a grating attachment. Shouldn't take but a few seconds. I'm using a hand grater today. I normally like bigger shreds rather than the smaller side of the grater. I'm using russets today, and these potatoes are absolutely full of water. So we want to make sure that when we're cooking our hash browns, we want them to be brown and not steam. If we just keep all the water in there and we threw it in a pan, it would steam the hash browns, and they would be not a golden caramelized beautiful hash brown. Instead, they would just be a sloppy, eventually steamed potato, which is not nearly as appetizing. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull all that moisture out of them. So what I do is I take them and I squeeze them, normally either over a strainer or over another bowl or directly over the sink, and I give them a good squeeze, getting as much moisture as I can out of the potato. And I do that for all the potatoes that I grated. I wanna show you how much water came out of 4 potatoes. So this is how much came out. This is 3/4 of a cup of water, potato water that came out of there. So there's a lot of water in there. If I was just gonna dump these directly into a pan with a little bit of butter, they would not brown as well. So I always try to pull as much water as possible out of potatoes. It helps them cook, and it makes sure that they turn crispy. So now if you watched my mashed potatoes recipe, you understand the concept that I learned in culinary school, which I carry with me when it comes to bland foods, specifically potatoes. They are literally a vehicle to get butter and salt into your mouth. That's it. And we're gonna be doing the same thing today. We're gonna be using a lot of butter, and we're gonna be making sure that these are properly seasoned. I season the potatoes before they go on the flame. This helps me make sure that the potatoes are seasoned properly, and I don't have to guess after it's cooking. So what I normally do is I'll normally hit them with some salt. And I use black pepper. You can use white pepper if you like, if you don't like the flakes in there, but I think black pepper, they're gonna be brown anyway, and I don't dislike the look of black pepper. So now I'll toss this a little, move it around, and I want it all to incorporate. I want to move these potatoes around so that all that pepper gets moved around and the salt. And I'm going to taste raw potato. I know to some of you that sounds disgusting, and it's not terribly appetizing, but it does allow me to taste before I put it on the flame and see if there's enough seasoning in it. So the heat is good, the amount of pepper is right, but it does need a little more salt. That's perfect. That's exactly where we want to be. All right, so first we're going to get our pan nice and hot. We're going to add a touch of butter to the bottom just to make sure that there's plenty of butter on the bottom. And I'm going to show you how much butter I'm going to put in. It's going to be kind of a lot of butter, but it makes a wonderful hash brown. So I'm starting out with about a tablespoon of butter, and I'm just going to slide this around the pan on the bottom. And now I'm going to put in my hash browns. And I'm going to take another tablespoon of butter here. I'm going to cut it into 4 pieces. And I'm going to drop it around the outside of the hash browns. Now, as this butter heats and melts, it will then coat underneath and on the sides so that it has a nice amount of fat, and also so it has a little bit of lubrication. What we want is it to be able to slide in the pan. I normally pat it down a little on the top so that I know underneath it's all touching the bottom of the pan. I want to make sure it's all touching the bottom of the pan here so that when I'm ready to flip this, it's going to have a nice crust of caramelized potato on the bottom. You see how it's jiggling in there, how it's able to move? It's going to start to come together and it will stay together. One thing that normally happens when people sometimes make these, they'll take the potatoes and they'll rinse them off, and that removes some of the starch. Well, that starch is really a wonderful way to keep the whole potato as a cake together when I flip it over. You can, if you want, rinse a little bit of the starch off, and then if you want, halfway through this, just scramble it up like they do at when you go to the diner, and you get almost like a hash where they scramble it up a little, and it's not a cohesive mass. I like it so it's almost like a cake when it's done. The other thing that they do at diners too, which I think makes their hash browns taste pretty bad, is they probably par cook them, most likely boiling it a little bit. And again, that pulls a little bit of that starch off, and it makes it so that they don't actually brown. I don't know if you've ever been to a restaurant or a diner, and they serve you hash browns, and they just look like white with the tiniest faint touch of caramelization. I absolutely hate it when they serve them like that. And it's because they have to par cook them in order to make sure that they can cook them quickly. So when you come in to order your meal, they have it mostly prepared, and they can just pull it out of either a warming dish or even just off the side at the side of the grill and throw it on and heat it up very quickly. But when we're at home, we can take some nice care to create a really nice cohesive cake of hash brown, which I think is far superior. You're also going to see the tops of this. If you look here, you'll start to see it starting to cook. It's almost like when you cook a burger, and you can kind of see how the patty is starting to cook on the top, even though it's not connected to the heating element. It's not on the pan, for instance. And you can see the top of it is starting to cook. That's what's happening here. And once it starts cooking all the way through, they become a little more, they lose their opaqueness, and they become a little more translucent. You can see the bits on the bottom that are starting to come out, starting to turn a little more translucent here. So now in a second, we're going to flip this. And the way you flip things in a pan, let me show you with a different pan. If I'm going to flip something with a pan, the first thing I want to do is tilt it forward, move it a little bit forward too. So as I tilt, I push forward, and then I flick my wrist up so that as I flick my wrist up, it starts to come back, and then I pull the pan back to catch it. So it's sort of one fluid motion. It tilts down, forward, I flip, and then I pull back to catch. I'm going to do that here in a second. You'll get a chance to see it. The best way to get good doing this and learning how to do it, get something that's hard, like beans, something that is not one cohesive thing, like beans or something. Beans are really great for this. Do it outside, don't do it inside. If you do it inside and you mess up, you're going to be cleaning up beans, uncooked hard beans from your floor. You'll be sweeping them up. So do it outside, but just practice that motion. And as you practice that motion, you'll start to understand exactly where the pan needs to be and how much you need to flick your wrist. And that's going to help you not only with what I'm going to show you today, but it'll also help you when you're just sauteing vegetables. It's a really easy way to get everything coated with what's on the bottom of the pan. And so learning that flick of the wrist is really helpful, especially when you're cooking on things like gas. Anything that this doesn't have to come into contact with. It's a little harder to do when you're doing induction because it has to be in contact the whole time. But when you have gas, the heat ranges from, you can have it very close and be hot and also be up. So you can flip while it's on and set it down. So it's actually a really useful technique. All right, so this is ready to flip. Here we go. You ready? Voila. Now look at how nice that looks, right? This is going to cook again on the other side, and we're going to cook it to this level on the other side too. But we, of course, want to have some butter on it. So we're going to add another tablespoon around the outside. And I'm actually going to lift up the sides here and let the butter go underneath. So we used 3 tablespoons of butter for 4. That's about right for 4 potatoes, about 3 tablespoons of butter. These are going to be the best hash browns you ever had, though. It's going to take about 5 to 7 minutes on each side. And the best way to know if it's ready to flip is just to peek underneath it. Just to lift it up a little, peek underneath it, see where it's at. That's the best way to know. Once it starts to caramelize, you'll know it's ready to go. Another thing too is make sure to smell. And you can smell the difference of when this is cooking and caramelizing versus when it's just cooking and not ready to turn yet. Once it starts to caramelize, you will smell the difference. You'll be able to smell that reaction. So it's starting to, I can just barely faintly tell that underneath it's starting to caramelize. And I will know in a minute or two, once that scent starts to grow, I'll know it's ready to go. So now if you do like yours mixed up a little, this is a perfect time to smash it up a little. If you want to smash it up a little and don't want to serve it as a cake, you can smash it up a little and then cook some more of the inside. I like the texture contrast, right? I like the texture of the soft hash browns inside that have cooked, that are a little bit wet still, but also have a lot of, there's a lot of starch in there and you can taste that. And then I also like the crispness on the top. So that's why I keep mine this way, but you could certainly mix these up at this point. All right, so it just came off the fire. Let's give it a shot. See how it tastes. So now I normally put this on a cutting board. I'll cut it into wedges and I'll serve it that way, but I'm just gonna put it all on a plate today since I'm the only one eating it. Okay, now, I don't know if you heard that. Hear that crunch? That's a well-made hash brown, if you can hear that crunch. You'd be happy if you got this in a diner. Crunchy, there's that really soft, delicious, very perfectly seasoned center of the potato, but then the outside of the potato, the stuff that's been in contact with the pan, has a really great crunch and an amazing flavor. So like it's really rich in flavor. All that butter just helps seal in all that flavor, and it gives it makes it exponentially taste better. And this is a proper way to make a hash brown. So please like, share, subscribe, hit that little bell icon so you get notifications when I post a video. I'm still sort of figuring out when I can actually make these videos in production with other projects that I'm working on. So they are not coming out at a regular time frame. So hitting that bell is super helpful. Allows you to know when I'm actually posting a video. Thank you so much for joining me. If you try this recipe, let me know in the comments below.